Kiitos paljon. Dear colleagues, in 2010 the United States, which is the only democratic country in the world to have adopted citizen-based taxation, enacted the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, the so-called FATCA, which is an extraterritorial legislation aimed at preventing tax evasion by US citizens and residents through offshore accounts. As part of the global efforts to fight corruption, cross-border tax fraud and tax evasion, European member states have concluded bilateral intergovernmental agreements with the United States in order to implement FATCA, obliging European financial institutions to report to the US tax authorities all holdings of their so-called US persons customers. I would like to underline that the Petitions Committee and the European Parliament strongly support tax transparency and all the efforts made to fight tax fraud. However, more than 8 years after FATCA's adoption, while unilateralism and protectionism unfortunately appear to be the cornerstones of the US foreign policy, it is now high time to assess the extraterritorial effects of FATCA on thousands and thousands of law-abiding EU citizens and their families. Therefore, in 2016, a collective of European citizens from 9 different member states submitted a petition to the European Parliament, to my committee, alerting us via the committee about the impact of FATCA and its implementing intergovernmental agreement on European citizens. They witnessed about violation of various fundamental principles of EU law, including the right to respect for private life, the prohibition of discrimination and data protection rules, as well as the EU Payment Accounts Directive. All this were brought to our attention, and to tell you the truth, it was shocking. In practice, FATCA has affected a large number of citizens in Europe, such as citizens who are nationals of both the US and a member state, and in particular the so-called accidental Americans, who, by accident of birth, inherited US citizenship, but who maintain no ties at all to the United States, having never lived, worked or studied in the US, and they do not hold US social security numbers. They are in many cases completely unaware of them being citizens in the US. FATCA does require foreign financial institutions to search for US persons by looking at a variety of indicators and indicators of power of attorney over the account to a US person with a US address, against which the individual is required to prove that he or she is not a US person. Because non-compliance with the requirement imposed results in heavy fines for financial institutions, many of them in the EU responded by avoiding all commercial business with customers presenting any US connection, whether actual or not. This appears to be in breach with the Payment Accounts Directive and the right for all EU citizens to have access to a payment account with basic features without discrimination. In addition, financial institutions have to disclose detailed information on accounts held by presumed so-called US persons to the US Internal Revenue Service via their national governments. And I'm eager to convey this message to the Commission this evening, this could constitute a breach of EU data protection rules and EU fundamental rights, and therefore it requires further investigation. The lives and livelihood of thousands of citizens in the EU are at stake here. Those falling within the definition of EU persons have their savings account frozen. They have no access to banking services, including life insurance, pensions and mortgages, due to the reluctance of financial institutions to follow the FATCA reporting. Their family members are also affected. And these issues need to be addressed at EU level altogether. And it is now, Madam Commissioner, high time that the European Commission takes appropriate action to protect the rights of affected European citizens, in particular the so-called accidental Americans. And I wonder how the European Commission and the Council intend to include the situation of accidental Americans in your transposition assessment of the Payment Accounts Directive. More generally, a full impact assessment of FATCA on EU citizens is badly needed at this moment to determine whether a serious discrepancy between EU citizens and residents in different member states exists concerning data protection. And last but not least, and I'm coming to an end, a common EU approach, and in particular an EU-US agreement on FATCA, could in fact prove to be more effective in ensuring reciprocity and upholding fundamental principles of EU law. I look very much forward to hearing from the Commission and equally from the Council on the diplomatic and legislative steps that you consider in order to protect the rights and interests of concerned EU citizens against the effects of FATCA. And I thank you very much.